Barbara Stanwyck lived a double life for years and no one knew, until now. Before seeing how she lives now, there is something about her story you need to understand. Barbara Stanwyck was born Ruby Catherine Stevens on July 16, 1907, in Brooklyn, New York. She came into the world far from the glamorous image people would later associate with her. Her childhood was marked by hardship, loss, and the kind of responsibility that forces a young person to grow up before they are ready. And perhaps that is where the mystery of Barbara Stanwyck really begins. She did not have the luxury of living an ordinary life. After losing her mother when she was still very young, and later losing her father, Barbara was left to navigate a difficult world largely on her own. Instead of allowing those experiences to break her, she developed something that would define her entire career: toughness. She learned to hide vulnerability behind confidence. She learned how to keep moving even when life gave her every reason to stop. That strength eventually carried her from the streets of Brooklyn into show business. She became one of Hollywood's most respected actresses, known for characters who were powerful, complicated, independent, and often impossible to intimidate. But here is the part many people overlook. Barbara's screen image was not simply acting. In many ways, it reflected the woman she had already been forced to become. Hollywood saw a star. Audiences saw confidence. Producers saw reliability. But behind that public image was a woman who guarded her private life intensely. She understood something many celebrities never learn. Fame gives people access to your image, but it does not mean they deserve access to your heart. Her career became enormous. She appeared in unforgettable films and later found success on television. She earned 4 Academy Award nominations, became a major television star, and built a reputation for professionalism that few could match. Yet the more famous she became, the more carefully she protected certain parts of herself. That is where the idea of her double life becomes fascinating. It was not necessarily a secret life in the sensational sense. It was the contrast between Barbara Stanwyck, the powerful public figure, and Ruby Stevens, the deeply private woman who had learned very early that survival sometimes means keeping your feelings hidden. Her personal relationships were complicated. She married twice, including actor Robert Taylor, and their relationship became one of Hollywood's most discussed romances. But behind the photographs and headlines was a much more complicated reality. Barbara was not someone who easily surrendered control of her life. She had spent too many years depending on herself. And perhaps that explains why people sometimes misunderstood her. A woman who refuses to be controlled can easily be called cold. A woman who keeps her emotions private can be described as distant. But sometimes what looks like coldness is simply self-protection. Barbara's greatest strength may also have been her greatest burden. She became incredibly good at carrying pain without showing it. As the decades passed, Hollywood changed around her. Younger stars arrived. Styles changed. The studio system disappeared. Yet Barbara continued working. She reinvented herself instead of desperately trying to remain the person she had been decades earlier. Her success on television proved that she was not simply a relic of classic Hollywood. She was an actress capable of surviving every era. Then came the quieter years. Barbara Stanwyck eventually stepped away from the spotlight. And that transition tells us something important about her. She did not seem desperate to remain famous simply for the sake of being seen. After spending much of her life under cameras, she valued privacy. She died on January 20th, 1990, at the age of 82, in Santa Monica, California. But even after her death, the fascination with her life never disappeared. Today, when people look back at Barbara Stanwyck, they often remember the fearless characters, the sharp voice, the unforgettable performances, and the woman who seemed impossible to break. But perhaps the more meaningful story is the one underneath all of that. She was a child who experienced loss, a young woman who had to become strong, a performer who learned how to command a room, and finally, an older woman who understood that not every part of a life needs to be performed for an audience. That may be the real secret behind her so-called double life. Barbara Stanwyck spent decades convincing the world that she needed nobody. But perhaps the truth was simpler. She had learned very early that she could survive almost anything by relying on herself. And maybe that is why her story still feels so powerful today. Because behind the Hollywood legend was not an untouchable star. There was a human being who knew loss, ambition, loneliness, love, and resilience. Barbara Stanwyck did not simply live two lives. She lived one extraordinary life while carefully choosing which parts of it the world was allowed to see. And sometimes, the most interesting secrets are not the ones someone hides. They are the parts of themselves they quietly protect until the very end.